Hi guys, Brindley Little here from your land partner and Property Developers Academy. Coming to you today for your next instalment of 100 in 100, instalment number 49. So nearly halfway through. And today's topic is rounding off the secure mini-series on managing the legal process. Up to this point during the secure mini-series, we've talked about different ways of structuring deals and the intricacies of the different types of contracts that you can use. We've looked at proposals, we've looked at negotiation, and now it's about moving forward through heads of terms and ultimately to managing the legal process through to a signed contract and a bit of success at that point, obviously. And then obviously moving on and cracking on with the remainder of the process and turning the paper profit into actual profit during the latter stages of the development process. Now, one thing I'd like to point out first of all is that at this point in the deal kind of pipeline and the process, in my opinion, it is now where the deal is at its most vulnerable, and you've got the most to lose, so to speak, up to this point, because obviously we put various parameters and various filters and processes and criteria and all things like that in place through the sourcing, through the appraisal process, to filter out deals that we don't want to move forward with or that don't necessarily work. But obviously up to this point, you put in a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money in certain circumstances to get the deal to this point. We know it's a deal. We know we can work with the landowners, and it's often when we get obviously third parties involved, the legal team, and the time it takes and the process you have to go through is where we've experienced, and we know others obviously have experienced it as well, is where the tides can really turn on the deal itself, and you can get opportunities that just fall out of bed at this point. And that's quite a difficult one, a bit of pill to swallow really, because obviously you have put in a lot of effort and you are that inches away really in the grand scheme of things of actually getting a successful deal across the line. So I would say that it is at its most vulnerable, and when you've got something at its most vulnerable, it needs the most care and attention. So this is about managing the process all the way through. What you don't want to be doing is you've got your signed heads of terms with all the various details on, you give it to your solicitor, you connect your solicitor to solicitor, and you just let them get on with it. Ultimately, yes, it is their job to get the contracts drawn up and all the details correct and fair to both parties. But unless you've got your finger on the pulse and you are regularly checking in and you're really the one driving the process, then it can just take time and months and months and months in certain circumstances. So what you want to do first of all is to obviously make sure that you've appointed the right firms and the right people within those firms to carry out the necessary works. If you're suggesting a solicitor for the landowner side, the site owner side, then make sure that you've obviously done your research or you've been recommended somebody. You have to be careful in terms of conflict of interest, so you can't use somebody that you've possibly used before that you're not using now possibly. You used to be able to put up what's called a Chinese wall within the same company, so you could almost have the same company acting for both sides, where you've got different people within that company, one acting for the landowner, one acting for you. You can no longer really do that. So it is about doing your research and making sure that whoever you're putting forward for the landowner's solicitor to use, then they are the right people for the job. One thing that you may or may not come across, it depends on the profile of the vendor that you're dealing with. If they're commercially aware, if they've done deals like this in the past, then you needn't worry. But if you're dealing with somebody, say for example, it's been passed to them through through an estate, you know, bereavement and passed down to them as a beneficiary, then they might not be as commercially aware, and therefore they might not know the process. So one of the key things I think during managing the early stages of the process, during the kind of bridge between heads of terms and obviously kicking things off, is explaining to them clearly what to expect as part of the next step. So obviously we throughout the kind of proposal negotiation period, we're constantly letting them know what the next steps are with regards to the development process, but this is where we're going into detail in terms of the next steps with regards to legals. So clearly lay that out for them. Obviously they're going to have to you know, deal directly with the with their solicitor. They're going to have to you know, sign client care. They're going to have to, you know, prove who they are and their you know, address and things like that. So you know, we've had instances where the standard set of procedure where a solicitor will send you a load of forms, you've got to go and fill them in order for them to act for you. But we've had instances where landowners at that point of kind of got cold feet, really, because they're a bit overwhelmed by all the process, because they weren't aware of it. You know, all these forms got to go down, got to take your passport, got to do all this. So if you can clearly lay out that you know, to them, even better if you can put that in some form of printed literature, that would be great. You know, next steps, if you've got a proposal document, if you first of all you might have a brochure, second of all you might have a proposal document, third of all you might have template heads of terms, fourth you might have the actual heads of terms, and then fifth you might have the next steps in terms of the legal process. So maybe that might be a suite of printed documents that you might want to think about in terms of managing the whole process. Obviously you from your side, you've got to do exactly the same thing from your solicitor's point of view, but you know, hopefully you've got a good relationship with your solicitor, and you've maybe done a few deals yourself anyway, so you know the process in terms of client care, giving them an undertaking, putting some money in their account. It's often with these types of deals that you're covering the landowner's solicitor's fees as well, so you'd be needing to deposit money into client accounts for that as well. But really, the key to managing this whole process is the constant chasing and following up that you need to be doing. Where possible, what we want to do is get some times and targets and dates fed back to you from both sides in terms of when they're likely to have completed their work and what they're aiming for, because the legal process can be infuriating at times. We've had good examples and good processes for ourselves at times with the legal side, but we've also had pretty excruciating ones as well that legals take more than 12, 13, 14 months, not weeks, when in reality, yes, we are often dealing with complicated types of projects, but a lot of the contracts, they have been done before. There are very, very few contracts that are started from scratch. They're always started from a bit of a base that's taken and then adapted. So it's about understanding how long and your expectations and how long that process is going to take, and then relaying that to the landowner as well. I think you'd be doing really well if you could get a contract in and out of legals in 3 months. That would be fantastic. As I said, it goes to the other end of the scale being a lot longer than that. So if you can be, you know, fairly realistic in terms of the expectations on timescales, then that's great. Obviously communicating that to the landowner as well. And ideally speaking, what we want to have is that in writing, because it's always good to have the right kind of paper trail with any dealing with any third parties. Not that we want to go to any disputes or anything like that, or we're purposely collecting the information in case, you know, things go wrong. But it's just good practice to get a good paper trail in place, written dates and everything that you can file within your project file. And you can always refer back to them, because obviously if it happens over a longer period of time and you're moving on to other projects and stuff, unless you're managing it really well, you might slip up on occasion in terms of hitting certain targets. So it's the constant chasing, the constant follow-up that is going to be the key to this process. So it depends in terms of your confidence level and your level of perhaps expertise, possibly, whether you want solicitor to solicitor communication. Obviously there's going to be that anyway, but rather than you chasing chasing their side in terms of getting back to you, you may want to go through your solicitor to do that. That just adds another layer. So then you've got to email or speak to your solicitor, then you've got to wait for them to speak to the landowner solicitor, and then you've got to wait for them to come back to the landowner solicitor, and then so on. So as you can see, it can get quite confusing and quite drawn out. Our preference personally is early on is to establish that we want to get direct communication with their legal team, so we can chase up them on a regular basis. Because it's a lot easier for you to control your side, because you're the client of theirs. Effectively, you're not the landowner's client, so there's only so much you can do. But actually, it's you're being seen to do all that you can as well, and that's obviously good from the landowner's point of view, because if things do start to get drawn out and deadlines are missed continuously, which you will come up against, solicitor might say, yes, I'm working on this and I will get back to you on Thursday, and they don't get back to you. And of course, then it's Friday, you don't expect a response. Then it's Monday, the week started. So before you know it, you're down into Tuesday or Wednesday, and the following week, you're another week ahead. And then you get the excuses as to why they haven't done what they said they're going to do. But if you're then seen to be doing all that you can, then from the landowner side, you can kind of almost build that bond between you two. And obviously then it's just about working together to try and get the result that you want in the quickest time possible. So one of the tips possibly, and not all solicitors like this, but to try and expedite the process as quick, and to try and make it as efficient as possible. Our preference is, once we've got a baseline agreement, and perhaps it's at that point it may or may not have been checked by the other solicitor. Our preference is to arrange a formal meeting. Now, that's generally at the landowner solicitor's office, the landowner present, the landowner solicitor present, and ourselves. Now, depending on the deal and the location and things like that, we may want to take our solicitor as well. You may want to, if you're not that confident or you're fairly new to development anyway. It's worth the money in terms of the hours that you're paying your solicitor to come and attend the meeting. Because what we want to do is sit around the table and discuss all of the things within the contract that need to be changed or discussed, or we need more information on, or additions or subtractions from the agreement. Because as you can imagine, and as some of you have probably experienced, when you do that over email and phone call, it gets the time just disappears. Whereas if we can just thrash out a lot of them, if we can get 90% of them done in one meeting, then we're just talking about the finer details, and then we're happy to do that for a bit more remote. Really, that's our main point and our main top tip in terms of managing and dealing with the legal side. That's not always possible, because, as I said before, some solicitors don't really like that. It's one of the areas of the development process that, in my opinion, needs a lot more standardization, and I think it needs a lot more bringing up to date and more efficient processes and more accountability in place, really, because you're paying a lot for these agreements, and obviously if you're paying for both sides as well, then there has to be a certain level of care in terms of getting getting these through and getting them done as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in reality. So it's just one of these things that you have to manage and deal with as best as you can. But main advice really is to just constantly be checking, chasing, and following up. They may get fed up of you, which undoubtedly they probably will. But ultimately, it's your deal. It's your almost livelihood in some respects. It's your blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this project up to this point. And for them, it's just another contract on another work day that they've got to get through, and they're likely to have other more lucrative contracts on their desk that they might get paid more for. Therefore, yours doesn't become a priority. So it is on, constantly badgering them at times and constantly being a finger on the pulse. But as I said, it's the most vulnerable stage of the deal process. But ultimately, if you can manage it correctly, then and try and minimize that time scale as much as possible, you will get some stressful times throughout, but ultimately it'll be worth it in the end, because you'll have something of real value that you can then move forward into our next topic on 100 in 100, which is planning. So join us again next time for your next installment of 100 in 100, and that is going to be kicking off stage 4 of the property development life cycle, and that is planning. So thanks very much. Hope you found this useful, and I'll see you again. Take care.